So again, kind of a little change now is we're going to look at, now that we understand the math behind the aggregate consumption function and why it takes the slope it takes and why it looks like it does, we're going to look a little bit more at the factors that, the variables that determine the aggregate consumption function, right? That might cause it to change over time. Okay, so we're going to look at things that might cause it to shift over time. And so I'm going to draw it out here. We have YD, we have consumption, and then here's my consumption function. Just call it CF0. So here I'm looking at if consumers expect higher aggregate income, so an increase in future income or an increase in wealth, maybe through a housing boom or a stock market boom. In both cases, if every consumer experiences this increase in income or increase in wealth, maybe we expect a super strong economy coming up, people are going to be more comfortable spending today. They're going to reduce consumption, reduce spending, and save more today. So what that's going to do to our consumption function is cause it to shift up. So this is sort of like a shift in demand, right? We are going to spend more money at all income levels, right? So that's going to be an increase. We can also do a decrease, right? We have a good example going on literally today as people expect an economic slowdown, stock markets to kind of taking a hit. We've seen consumption fall for all income levels. So this would be if wealth goes down. This would be if wealth goes up. So kind of the two main variables that are going to shift our consumption function are changes in disposable income and changes in wealth. Those are going to be the two big factors. Now, I'm going to do another quick kind of not trick question, but another sort of answer or problem to walk you through sort of the thought process is, okay, we have this now. We have YD equals consumption. And this is going to be kind of true for how we've defined our consumption function. What happens if collectively I lower people's taxes? I'm going to kind of let you think about this. You can pause it. If I lower people's taxes, people are going to have more disposable income, and certainly they're going to be free to spend more. We would expect them, right? If I give you $1,000 check, you're going to consume more. But how do I show that? Right? Suppose we were right here initially, and then I lower everyone's taxes. Well, whenever I change the variable on a line is y minus taxes plus transfers. If this goes down, YD goes up. So I go this way. Call that YD1. And so I don't shift, I move along my consumption function. Yes, consumption will go up, but it's just not a shift. So just be careful that you recognize whenever something on the axes changes, it's not a shift, it's a movement along a line. All right, so now we're going to get into investment spending. Investment spending, although it's not a huge component of GDP, it is going to be by far the most important. And the two things we're going to kind of focus on, really, I guess, one thing is we're going to say initially investment is going to be relatively independent of disposable income. So it's going to be flat for the most part. What it depends on is, and this should intuitively make sense, is the interest rate. As the interest rate goes down, it gets cheaper to borrow money, so investment goes up. Remember, the interest rate isn't what you make on your investment, it's the borrowing cost to make your investment. You borrow money, right, from a bank, from a financial intermediary, and you make an investment into physical capital. It's not the rate of return on an investment, right? Those are very different things. Existing production capacity, right? As production capacity goes up, right? If we have room in our facilities, then investment's going to go down. If we have tons of excess capacity, we're not going to have any necessarily desire to produce more. And then again, the economy, right? If we think future income is going to go up, we want to take advantage of that today and build our capacity so we can increase production and meet the demand of that future spending. So that would cause investment to go up today. So just a definition here, an accelerated principle, right? The idea here is that sort of investment kind of is increasing with real GDP, right? If we think we're going to have a higher rate of growth of GDP, we know that's going to lead to higher planned investment spending, right? And I'm going to focus on this word here because we're going to break investment up here into two components and planned and unplanned investment. So just pay attention in this section as I go through this. Okay, so this graph is going to be really important in telling us why we care so much about investment spending. If you look at our past 6 recessions, there is a relatively small change in consumption, and in some cases, it actually went up, right? And this is because for a lot of households, they undertake what we call consumption smoothing. They smooth their consumption over their lifetime. They're not spending always 100% of their income. So when they have a recession, they can only cut back consumption a little bit and keep going, or they borrow, do some other things, go into debt. So consumption tends to level out over most business cycles. The big driver here, as you can see on all these, is our investment. It tends to sort of be the driver of the business cycle. Here, this one was really on housing, right? And remember, investment really includes 3 components. So investment, when we go back to our definition of GDP, right? Investment equaled fixed capital. This is really firms making investment decisions. So I'm going to put firms over here. Residential. These are really households, right? New homes is what those are. And one that we're going to spend a lot of time talking about are inventories. Inventories are going to be really important. And I'm going to write this word planned here and write expected here, because we don't always know what inventories are going to do throughout the period, right? Firms use inventories and a little bit like how we use savings, right? They have a buffer that if all of a sudden there's an increase in demand for their product, they can dip into their inventories and sell their inventories, right? They don't always run on zero, so they have a stockpile waiting for people to buy. So that's going to be a big point of fluctuations here that we're going to talk about. So hinting at the definition of inventories, right? We have inventories right here. That is essentially all these goods we've produced in expectation of future sales. So firms have to make a decision today on production levels over time. You don't just decide, oh, I'm going to produce 5 million more iPads because I have an increase in demand today. You make that decision months in advance so you have the machinery and the equipment, the tooling in place to produce those extra iPads. And so we're going to look a lot at how this term right here plays a role, unplanned inventory investment, right? What's going to happen in the business cycle when there's an increase in spending or a decrease in spending. So those are going to be 2 components that we're going to spend a lot of time talking about. So when we look at investment spending, it's going to actually have 2 components. It's going to have what we plan to do, right? So what we plan to do is going to be literally physical capital, that fixed investment, and expected inventories. Unplanned are going to be changes in inventories. Did we produce the right amount of stuff throughout the year? And that's going to be the key question that's going to drive those fluctuations in our business cycle. So here's what I mean in terms of planned and unplanned inventories. So firms have to make a production decision today. Right? So suppose the firm, we're going to talk about maybe iPads. They're going to produce maybe $100 million worth of iPads for the next quarter. All right. So they make this production decision, and they have to make this decision based off of kind of expected sales, right? And some inventory. They don't want to expect 100 million in sales and produce 100 million in sales. So let's suppose that they expect to have in sales maybe 900 or 95 million. So they're going to expect to retain 5 million in inventory. That if everything goes as planned, they dump those last 5 million when they ramp up production for the next version of the iPad, right? So this is sort of their expected inventory right here, right? So investment for our intensive purposes right now, we're just looking at inventory, is going to be whatever we make in physical capital, right? So planned investment is going to equal physical capital plus inventories, which are 5 million. Actual investment, right? Now all of a sudden, expected sales were 95 million. But suppose, right, instead of expected sales being 95 million, right, suppose actual sales turn out to be only 90 million. So Apple's going to find actual inventories not 5 million, but 10 million. So what does this mean for investment? So instead of planned investment being physical capital plus 5 million, planned investment is the same physical capital, whatever they built on their warehouses is going to persist, plus 10 million. You'll notice planned investment in this case this shouldn't be planned, this should be actual I, my bad, actual I. I don't know what I was doing. Is going to be greater than planned, right? Because we have picked up more in inventory. There was an unexpected increase in inventory that's going to show up as production today, but it's going to drive our production decisions in the future. If I have this extra inventory, I'm going to end up producing less in the future. So these are just some economics and actions kind of discussion for you to look at the relationship between interest rates and the housing boom, right? So two really quick time periods, right? We had low interest rates in the early 2000s, drove a huge boost in housing sales, and the outcome of that, right, we'll show you, is increases in home sales, overbuilding, finding borrowers that weren't qualified, all these things. But then 2006 happened and there was a bust in the housing bubble. So this is what drove that 2007 to 9 recession. Here's the low interest rates taking place. Low interest rates declined in that 2001, 2, 3, 4 period. They've still continued to go down, right, which has been nice to help us recover, right? So there's the low interest rates. Here's the housing boom. But here's the crash, right? All of this sort of building here, right, was fueled from low interest rates and was fueled due to some changes in regulation of who can qualify for mortgages. And at this point right here, right, there was this kind of reversal. All these people that had bought homes, a lot of them couldn't make their payments, payments adjusted on them, and there was this massive wave of defaults. And you can see even where we are right around here, we're still not back there yet. So just some interesting volatility things to follow. Okay, practice question. An increase in disposable income will, so this is, again, your disposable income is Y minus taxes plus transfers. So that's that example of suppose I cut your taxes. Is that a shift? We know it's not a shift. Anytime something moves along the axes, it is not a shift. It's going to move, right? In this case, it's going to move right. It's going to increase consumption. You're going to move right along up the consumption function. A shift in the aggregate consumption function, upward shift, right? So what's going to drive us to want to spend more money today for all income levels? Expectation of higher incomes, expectation of less income, stock market crash, or reduction in wealth. Well, I'll tell you what, under B, C, or D. I'm certainly not going to want to spend more today. If I have less income in the future, if my wealth's taking a hit, I'm going to spend less. So those are going to lead me to answer this as A. As always, when you have questions, please send me an email. Thanks.